Hey everybody, this is just a little article from the Fathom website by Matthew Bolton. Matthew Bolton wrote a book critiquing Corbynism with Frederick Harry Pitts, who you might know better from their various writings about the Marxist critique of political economy. This is from November 2023, which is probably obvious since, maybe it's not obvious, but the subject matter of the article is very recent. Anyway, here's a little bio of Matthew, or a little introduction to the piece. Matthew Bolton, of the Center for Research on Anti-Semitism at Berlin's Technische Universität, introduces the center's Decoding Anti-Semitism project's latest research on online anti-Semitism in the wake of the October 7th pogrom. Quote, "The results were striking," end quote, he finds, end quote, suggest a significant radicalization of online discourse about Israel, Israelis, and Jews, end quote. A previous summary of Decoding Anti-Semitism's research by Carolina Placzynta, Placzynta, was published by Fathom in April of this year. So here we go. It's only a short thing. Since 2020, the Decoding Anti-Semitism project has been analyzing anti-Semitic comments posted on social media in the UK, Germany, and France. Based at the Center for Research on Anti-Semitism at Technische Universität Berlin and made up of international researchers from a range of disciplines, the project's rationale is that much, if not most, anti-Semitism online is not expressed in direct form. While there are plenty of anti-Semitic comments which abuse or threaten Jews explicitly, many are disguised or coded so that their meaning can only be understood in context. Some of the most virulently anti-Semitic posts do not mention the word, quote, Jew, or other obvious terms at all. They use puns, in-jokes, or memes, or make references whose meaning can only be grasped by careful analysis of a comment's immediate context, linguistic structure, and wider, quote, world knowledge, end quote. The proliferation of, quote, coded, end quote, anti-Semitism online poses a serious problem for both the analysis of the levels of anti-Semitism online and for strategies to counteract it. To combat this, the project uses qualitative analysis by trained experts to draw out implicit meanings of comments that might otherwise be missed by automated or keyword and approaches. The project's methodology begins with the identification of certain, quote, discourse triggers, end quote, which may stimulate anti-Semitic responses, i.e., scanning the news to find stories that are related to Jews or to Israel in some way. The focus of the project is on the responses posted to major media outlets rather than extremist or radicalized milieus. The aim is to discover the extent to which anti-Semitic ideas are penetrating politically, quote, moderate, end quote, debates online. Once these triggers have been selected, common threads posted in response are downloaded for analysis. Each, quote, corpus, end quote, of comments is then analyzed for anti-Semitic content using a comprehensive, quote, guidebook, end quote, which sets out the key characteristics and common modes of expression of more than 45 anti-Semitic concepts and stereotypes. In the weeks following the Hamas atrocities in Israel, Decoding Anti-Semitism has analyzed over 11,000 social media comments posted on YouTube and Facebook in the UK, Germany, and France. Last week, the project published a preliminary report on their findings, celebrating terror, anti-Semitism online after the Hamas attacks on Israel. The analysis was restricted to mainstream news stories reporting directly on the Hamas attacks, i.e., prior to any Israeli military response. The results were striking. They suggest a significant radicalization of online discourse about Israel, Israelis, and Jews. Taking the corpus as a whole, the levels of anti-Semitic comments was generally higher than in previous escalation phases of the Middle East conflict, such as the May 2021 conflict between Israel and Hamas. In some threads, anti-Semitic comments accounted for 50% or even 60% of the total. This is a dramatic leap from the previous average of 10 to 15% of anti-Semitic comments on the French and 20 to 25% of anti-Semitic comments on the UK side in Israel-related topics. Moreover, there is a notable shift in the type of anti-Semitic comments posted. In previous studies related to the Arab-Israeli conflict, classic anti-Semitic distortions, e.g. that Israel is inherently evil or controls the world, history-distorting analogies that Israel is a colonial, apartheid, or even a Nazi state, have frequently combined with a more or less open denial of Israel's right to exist. However, explicit affirmation, glorification, or celebration of violent killings of Jews have hitherto been relatively rare. The preliminary findings from this investigation indicate that this is no longer the case. The analysis found a substantial rise in the number of comments directly celebrating, affirming, and glorifying the Hamas attacks, or calling for further attacks through the use of threats and death wishes. Furthermore, the number of direct affirmations of violence rose in threads responding to stories directly reporting, often in graphic details, on the attacks on Israelis, compared with those about the conflict more generally. In short, news stories where the commenters could have been in no doubt about the horrific nature of the violence on Israeli civilians stimulated a greater anti-Semitic response. In the UK corpus, examples of clear affirmation and support for the attacks included comments such as, quote, "long overdue," end quote, BBC YouTube. Quote, "the Palestinians are finally fighting back," end quote, Guardian YouTube. Quote, "good job Palestine," end quote, "go on lads," end quote, Time YouTube. Quote, "so happy to see justice finally, heart," end quote, Times YouTube. Other commenters celebrated the, quote, "amazing scenes coming from Gaza, long live Palestine," end quote, Independent Facebook. Quote, "very well done, Hamas. Done great job. We fully support and stand with Hamas. Thumbs up, heart, thumbs up, heart, thumbs up, heart, thumbs up." Telegraph Facebook. Quote, "more power to Hamas," end quote, BBC Facebook. Quote, "joyful. About time they taste it," end quote, Telegraph Facebook. Additionally, comments affirmed violence in combination with other speech acts such as curses and death wishes directed at Israel. Quote, "they deserve 60 years of this, not only a day. Then we will have peace perhaps," end quote. Comments also used puns or allusions to indiscriminately reject all Jews rather than just Israelis or the territorial conflict. Quote, "jurn the booze," end quote, JURNTHEBEWS, end quote, Guardian YouTube. Quote, "the Palestinians will complete the job that the Austrian painter started," end quote, BBC YouTube. Anti-Semitic reactions to reports of the massacre at the Tribe of Nova music festival were characterized by particular glee. Quote, we were terrified, end quote, good, cry harder," end quote, BBC Facebook. Quote, "at a rave, crying, laughing, crying, laughing, crying, laughing, crying, laughing, GTFO." end quote. Independent Facebook. These comments were often accompanied by analogies between Israel and the Nazi regime, with comparisons of Gaza to Auschwitz common. Quote, Supernova Festival a bit like raving next to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Guardian Facebook. Quote, lol, that's like having a rave next to Auschwitz. It shows a disgusting lack of basic moral. End quote. Guardian Facebook. This pattern, with direct affirmations of the violence being the most common anti-Semitic response to reports of the atrocities, was replicated in both the German and French studies. In some German YouTube threads, as with the UK, commenters used paraglider icons to indirectly express affirmation of the terrorist actions. There was direct praise for the attacks in statements such as, quote, Masada Subhan Allah, keep it up, guys, end quote. Quote, great performance, thumbs up, end quote, build YouTube. Or, quote, Hamas for the win, muscle arm, fist, end quote, build YouTube. In the French corpus, 53% of all anti-Semitic comments affirmed or celebrated the violence. By contrast, such affirmation was present in only 20% of anti-Semitic comments responding to terrorist attacks in Israel in the spring of 2022. These comments were frequently accompanied by comparisons between Israel and Nazi Germany. Hamas was compared to the French resistance who opposed Nazism, though comments such as, quote, how did we end up turning resistance into terrorism? During the occupation, the resistance took up arms against the Germans and they were glorified for it, end quote. Le Figaro. Facebook. Israeli treatment of Palestinians was equated with Nazi atrocities. Quote, a people on which tons of phosphorus bombs are being dumped on. Even Hitler didn't do this, end quote. Le Figaro. Facebook. Quote, Hamas is paying it back for their people since 1948 by Star of David committing genocide, Holocaust, but a real one, and the perpetrators are the survivors of 1945. Chin scratch emoji, end quote. Le Figaro. Facebook. The last comments also map onto negationist narratives by contrasting the, quote, real, end quote, genocide of Palestinians with the supposedly, quote, fabricated, end quote, ones of the Jews. From these preliminary results, it seems as if public opinion discourse has moved from distorting projections onto the Jewish-Israeli outgroup towards forms of self-positioning, through which web users justify, welcome, and celebrate Hamas's atrocities. Conceptually, this represents a stark contrast to all the corpus analysis conducted by the project so far, and suggests that a turning point has been reached in social media discourse about Israel. This study indicates that the Hamas attacks have been marked by a normalization of explicit hate speech and a potential radicalization of even politically moderate online milieus. The terrorist events on the 7th of October, which the Israeli public describes as the worst crime since the Holocaust, seem to have opened a new chapter for the articulation of anti-Semitism in, quote, mainstream, end quote, discourses on social media. Footnote. Unfortunately, due to the restrictions imposed by Elon Musk on accessing Twitter data since his takeover, it is currently not possible to analyze Twitter threads in an accurate or comprehensive manner. End of footnote.